Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 368, Judgment Day. Now, as you can see, this episode also has a new title sequence thing where it shows both Ash's badge case and May's ribbon case, and that's because we're now officially on Season 8 of the series, Pokemon Advanced Battle. Anyways, the episode begins with Ash and the gang tired of Lily Cove City already after May having her contest there, so now they were on their way to Mosdeep City, although of course they had to go on the ferry from Lily Cove to get there. Although they were experiencing a severe issue, which was that they had overslept at the Lily Cove Pokemon Center the night before, after May's contest, so now they were running late for the ferry that was about to depart from the Lily Cove port, and they were running there as fast as they could. As Ash and the gang started to approach the harbor, May solely blamed Ash for both sleeping in and eating his breakfast too long, although Ash blamed May for admiring her ribbons for too long. Brock tried his best to end May and Max's argument, although he was struggling, since he had a frisbee in his mouth, presumably from playing fetch with his mudkip earlier or some shit, and because of this, he couldn't speak properly. Fortunately, Max saw that Brock was unable to say anything, so he told Ash and May to stop and just keep running. Soon, Pikachu pointed into the distance, indicating to Ash and the gang that they were finally nearing the ferry. In a Deus Ex Machina moment, Ash and the gang just barely managed to make it on the ferry right as it set off, and they quickly ran up to the second floor of the ferry where the deck was so that they could relax, and they all stated how relieved they were that they actually made it to the ship in time. While Ash, May, and Brock were saying their thanks to God for letting them fucking go on the ferry in time, Max was listening to the little intercom as they pulled away from the Lily Cove port and heard that this ferry actually wasn't going to Mosdeep City, but rather an island known as Bomba Island, and Max screamed out that Ash and the gang weren't on the right ferry. Ash was confused, and Brock was too, so he pulled out a map to try and make sure that they were heading to the right place. Although, when he looks at the map, he compared a picture of an island on the map to an island that he could now see in the distance that the ship was heading straight towards. And as Brock further examined the map, he found out that this island was in fact called Bomba Island, and it was very large, situated in between Mosdeep City and Lily Cove. Ash and the gang initially panicked at this, realizing that they were probably in such a hurry to get to the ferry that they ended up going on the wrong one by mistake. Although they soon calmed down when they actually arrived at Bomba Island, knowing that they had to remain level-headed so they could try and think of a plan to get back to Lily Cove so that they could go on the right ferry the next time it arrived. Although, Max checked his Pokénav and saw that there was no direct ferry from Bomba Island to Mosdeep Island, apparently. Yeah, that's right. That's yet another thing that Brock had figured out, was that Mosdeep City was a city, but it was also an island, which kind of made sense because you did need a ferry to get there. Anyways, Brock and Max instantly began to wonder how they could find another way to Mosdeep City, since they couldn't go back to Lily Cove now, because the ferry that went from Lily Cove to this island was gone. So May suggested that they head into a city that she could see on the island and look for answers there, hoping that maybe someone in the city's population would know how to get to Mosdeep. Ash admitted that this was a good idea, and they started to look for answers, but they didn't find any, and Max got bored not finding anything, so he suggested that they take some detours while they were in this city anyways, since they weren't finding any information on Mosdeep, wanting to visit some shops. May agreed with this, wanting to visit some shops as well, and suggested that maybe even after Mosdeep they could go to some other islands to shop, and now thinking the idea of island hopping could be fun. Although Ash simply stated that they should focus on one thing at a time, and focus on getting to Mosdeep, although admitted that he wouldn't mind doing a bit of sightseeing, because he wanted to see some rare water-type Pokemon on this island. So, Ash and the gang began doing some searching for answers while messing around in the city. Just then, as they were going through the city, an Ivysaur walked by them, carrying a box with its vines that looked pretty heavy. May, at first, mistaked it for a Bulbasaur and a Venusaur, although Max corrected her that it was an Ivysaur, as a Charmeleon waddled by carrying another heavy box. Max, being the Pokemon expert, corrected May again when she confused Charmeleon with its pre-evolution Charmander. Max was getting pretty annoyed, but he didn't want May to continue making any dumb mistakes. Unfortunately, May made another mistake when a Wartortle then walked by, carrying a long pole, and May referred to it as its pre-evolution Squirtle. Max tried to correct May, but even he couldn't think of Wartortle's name this time, and actually mistook it himself for a Blastoise, although Max quickly realized that he made a mistake just then. But before Max could correct himself, Brock and Ash then butted in, with Brock confirming that the Wartortle was in fact a Wartortle, not a Squirtle or Blastoise, and Ash laughed a bit, surprised that even Max could forget the names of Pokemon sometimes, and revealed that he was an expert on Ivysaur, Charmeleon, and Wartortle, since they were the evolved forms of the Kanto starter Pokemon that he was so accustomed to due to growing up in Kanto. Just then, a man who looked about the age of a grown-up teenager comes running down the street carrying 3 more boxes. He called for the 3 middle-stage Kanto starters to wait up for him, but he ended up tripping, therefore smashing his head into the pavement ground and causing him to drop all of his boxes, which fall on him. Ash and the gang immediately run to the guy to make sure he was okay, and the guy assures that he was. Ash and the gang then questioned why the guy was calling for the 3 Pokemon, leading the guy to reveal that the 3 middle-stage Kanto starters were actually his Pokemon, and he noted that they also seemed concerned about him, so he assured his 3 Pokemon that he was okay, just as he had assured Ash. May then complimented the man on his 3 Pokemon, saying that they were very cute, while the man thanked her and introduced himself as Jimmy, and Ash and the gang introduced themselves as well. Jimmy then asks Ash and the gang if they were in the city for the Pokemon Battle Judge Training Institute, a type of school. Ash and the gang denied this, explaining that they were trying to get to Mosdeep City, but ended up on this island instead, though Jimmy insisted that Ash and the gang come with him. explaining that they could even battle there. Ash and the gang were confused, obviously, as to what this place was, but Ash, wanting to battle at any point he possibly could, decided to go along with Jimmy, and all of Ash's friends followed him. And they eventually arrived at the campus, just outside of the actual school building, which was located in a forest. The building also had a park area surrounding it, where a whole bunch of judges and referees were being trained, holding out flags and shit like that, like, the red and green flags that most gym announcers would hold out. And Jimmy explained that judges and referees came to this school to learn how to be a judge and referee, and added that he himself was an upcoming referee in training, and he was enrolled at the school. Jimmy continues to carry some boxes, while his 3 Pokemon carry some as well, with Jimmy being sure to give his Pokemon assistance if they were struggling with carrying the boxes. And soon enough, Ash and the gang and Jimmy passed by a woman training some young referee students on the basics of using referee flags. With each whistle blow that the woman would make, on cue, the trainees, mostly children, would switch hands and raise another flag, with one hand holding a red flag and one hand holding a green flag. Jimmy then explained that training to be a Pokemon battle referee was just like becoming a trainer, in that it took a lot of hard work and effort. Ash and the gang and Jimmy didn't go any further past the woman and her trainees, as the 3 Pokemon of Jimmy's, along with Ash and the gang, who had decided to help, and Jimmy himself, placed down all the boxes, and Jimmy calls out to the woman, telling her that the boxes were ready and had arrived, addressing her as Professor Serena. No, not that Serena, you know that. Anyways, Serena knew Jimmy was calling her, and turns around, taking her attention away from her trainees, and happily greets Jimmy, although Brock wanted Serena to greet him, because, just like with most women, Brock was instantly in love, and started to go and flirt with her. Ash and the gang were obviously embarrassed by Brock's behavior, though before he could actually go up to flirt, he was stopped by Jimmy talking to Serena. Once Serena had asked Jimmy who Ash and the gang even were, so Jimmy was basically introducing Ash and the gang, and adding that they were Pokemon trainers, and they were originally on their way to Maz Deep, but then they got lost on this island. Serena ignored the part about how they managed to get lost on this island, and was impressed merely on the fact that Ash and the gang were Pokemon trainers, and picked 2 of them at random, being Ash and Brock, asking if they wanted to help her by having a double battle, where both of them would send out 2 of their Pokemon and have them battle each other, with Jimmy being the ref. Ash was a bit confused, so Serena explained how this would help her, saying that it would be good practice for Jimmy to ref a double battle, and it would basically be a way for Jimmy to get experience reffing without her having to teach him shit. And also added that several other referee trainees would likely watch as well. Brock instantly leaped towards Serena, taking the opportunity to flirt with her, saying that he would do anything that she wanted, including doing a double battle for her. However, as Brock kept flirting, Max eventually dragged him away by the ear, saying that if there was anything Brock should do, it was visit the principal's office. But nonetheless, Brock came back from Max's dragging, and Brock and Ash prepared for their double battle. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they had followed Ash and the gang to just off of the island, in the water, in none other than their Magikarp sub. They fixed it! No way! Holy fuck! That's insane! Anyways, Jesse was the one in front, using the periscope, while Meowth and James were in the back, and all 3 of them were doing the pedaling. Meowth managed to get a peek through the periscope, and he was the first one to notice Pikachu, as Jessie hadn't been able to spot him because she was too busy fucking around with the periscope. But Meowth took interest in something other than Pikachu today, of course being Jimmy's 3 middle stage Kanto starters, and he instantly declared that Team Rocket should steal them, although Jessie and James wondered why they would be that worthy of stealing, as opposed to Pikachu, leaving Meowth to go into one of his boss fantasies and spread this fantasy to Jessie and James, as the fantasy involved Giovanni stamping a large stack of papers, and Meowth explained that with the 3 middle stage Kanto starters, Giovanni would be motivated to stamp faster, and in turn have more free time since much of his time would be spent stamping. Jesse and James questioned why Giovanni would suddenly stamp all of his official work papers faster, just because of some starter Pokemon, leading Meowth to state that Giovanni would likely be so pumped up and so thankful for Team Rocket for getting him these Pokemon that he'd be so motivated to stamp, and not only that, he would be so impressed with Team Rocket that he would give them all promotions. Thinking of the promotions, Jesse and James instantly understood Meowth's boss fantasy, and all of Team Rocket cheered, officially planning to catch the 3 starter Pokemon, or the 3 middle stage starters anyways. Just as Wobbuffet forcibly popped out of its Pokeball, forcing Jesse to recall it. Anyways, back at the referee school thing, Ash, Brock, May, Max, Jimmy, and Serena, as well as several other referees in training, all went to a battlefield surrounding the school, and Ash and Brock were positioned on opposite sides of the battlefield, with May and Max on the sidelines with the rest of the referee trainees, aside from Jimmy, who was being the referee. Serena was on the sidelines as well, at first explaining the usual referee rules that most referees would declare, such as the fact that, oh yeah, it's a double battle, there's no time limit, both trainers using 2 Pokemon each, shit like that, and then she told Jimmy to take over. Jimmy seemed a bit nervous, but he took Serena's place anyways, and continued on with the rules, basically restating them, and also officially declaring that it was time for Ash and Brock to begin the battle. So Ash called out his Swellow and Corphish for his 2 Pokemon, while Brock sent out his Mudkip and Lombre as his 2 Pokemon. Jimmy then lifted the 2 flags, signifying that it was time for the battle to begin, 1 flag representing Brock and 1 flag representing Ash. Ash was confident he could win, and both Ash and Brock gave their Pokemon a pep talk to encourage them to win, and they also promised each other that they were going to give it all they got, as the battle began with Ash ordering Swellow to use Aerial Ace and ordering Corphish to use Bubble Beam. Corphish goes for the Bubble Beam first, and Swellow stays close to it in order to guard it. Lombre, however, uses its arms to block the Bubble Beam, and Swallow saw that this could be an issue, so it flew up into the sky, ready to deliver a surprise attack on Lombre if need be. Lombre seemed to be failing to fully block the bubble beam though, so Mudkip took action by rushing up behind Lombre and supporting it as it continued to deflect the bubble beam. And it also pushed Lombre from side to side so that the bubble beam couldn't hit it straight on in any area, and would have to keep moving if it wanted to try and hit him. Things were looking pretty good for Brock with his Mudkip and Lombre, but even though Swallow hadn't fully mastered Aerial Ace, it snuck up on Mudkip and Lombre and knocked them both away with a fast Aerial Ace attack, leaving May and Max impressed with Swallow's strength. With Max commenting that Ash must have planned to use Aerial Ace from the very beginning, which was why he had Swallow fly away, so that it could sneak up on Lombre and Mudkip. Ash didn't confirm nor deny this though, just glad that the attack worked, knowing that it wasn't fully mastered yet. May further stated how impressed she was with Swallow's Aerial Ace, and glad that Ash's training paid off, since he had to train while watching her contest from outside. And Jimmy was watching Ash's Swallow closely as well, in awe of its strength, but this meant he wasn't paying attention to his referee duties, so Serena told Jimmy to make sure to pay attention to those duties. Since Jimmy hadn't really been paying attention at all, since he was caught off guard by Ash's Swallow, he didn't know what exactly was going on, so Serena simply told Jimmy, wanting him to at least be successful in his referee training, so that hopefully he would learn from her telling him that Brock's Pokemon looked weak after the Aerial Ace, so Jimmy should just declare Ash the winner. Jimmy nervously agreed, because he wasn't entirely sure he should declare Ash the winner yet, and sure enough, his assumption was right. As before he could declare anyone the winner, he noticed Brock's Pokemon that was seemingly knocked out actually get up. And Jimmy smiled at the fact that he was able to know not to call the battle yet, and Brock and Ash saw Jimmy standing there, about to wave two flags up in the air, and question what he was doing, leading Jimmy to just tell Ash and Brock to continue battling, and ignore what he just did. Ash obliges, as he has Corphish use Bubble Beam, knocking Lombre back, down once again, even though it had just gotten up, leading Brock to panic, not knowing what to do, but suddenly, Lombre weakly got up, indicating that it was still ready to battle, even if it was tired. Although, Brock then got an idea, realizing that this battle was more to test the referees than the trainers, and Brock ordered his Lombre to play like it was already knocked out, and go back to laying down on the ground, rather than getting back up, so that Jimmy could be fooled into thinking that Lombre was unable to battle, even though it wasn't. Basically, he wanted to mess with Jimmy's head, so that it would make it more challenging for him to become a referee, so he could become a better one immediately, because he would start off with something kind of difficult, which involved being able to actually tell if a Pokemon had fainted or not. Anyways, Lombre agreed and laid flat on its face, as if it was knocked out. Sure enough, leaving Jimmy confused, wondering if he should call the match, or if Lombre had actually fainted or not. Serena seemed annoyed at Jimmy not actually being able to tell, but while Jimmy was distracted and confused and all that, Ash ordered Swallow to go in for another Aerial Ace, assuming that both Lombre and Mudkip were both actually down, but then Brock decided to kibosh his plan of thinking Lombre had fainted, since he thought he had confused Jimmy enough, and he had Lombre get up and fire off a Razor Leaf, canceling out Swallow's Aerial Ace. Swallow tried to use Wing Attack to deflect the leaves back, but it failed at this, leaving Ash, Max, May, who was holding Pikachu, and Swallow in complete shock, solely at the fact that Lombre and Mudkip were both still up. Swallow had bigger problems though, as it had been hit hard from the Razor Leaf and landed panting next to Corphish, leaving May and Max impressed by Brock's catch-off-guard strategy. Even though Swallow was weakened from this Razor Leaf attack though, it still wasn't down, so Brock ordered a double water gun coming from both Mudkip and Lombre to finish off Swallow. But Ash instructs Corphish to take the hit, since it was a water type, so it would be able to take the water guns a lot better, so it obliged jumping in front of Swallow and shielding it from the water guns. After taking both of these water guns, Corphish hit the ground hard, and it seemed like it was in a lot of pain. Jimmy was indecisive, not wanting to make the wrong call, but he saw that Corphish seemed unable to battle, so after a while, he said that Corphish was unable to battle, and added that it seemed like Swallow was unable to battle as well, and therefore called both Corphish and Swallow down, so Brock was the winner of the battle. Ash was shocked by this, and began to yell at Jimmy, saying that his Pokemon still had fight left in them for sure. Jimmy interjected though, saying that Corphish had nothing left for sure, although he would reconsider on Swallow, but suddenly, Corphish leaped up, ready for more, shocking Jimmy, as he didn't understand how Corphish just took two attacks head on and wasn't knocked out, leaving Serena to butt in, scolding Jimmy, as she calls his judgment amateur, and states that Corphish was able to survive both attacks because it was a water type, so water attacks did like fucking half the damage that they usually would, and stated that if Jimmy wanted to be a referee, he had to learn that a Pokemon hit by ineffective attacks could still have will left to fight, and didn't need to be called out right away. Jimmy seemed a little hurt, and promised to remember next time, although Serena continued to scold Jimmy again, not permitting the battle to go on, as she told Jimmy that she was very disappointed that he didn't call Lombre out of the battle when it acted as if it was fainted. Jimmy was confused, thinking that he made the right call by not calling Lombre fainted, since it wasn't, but Serena stated that it was against the rules to purposely tell your Pokemon to faint and still keep it in battle. So, therefore, Jimmy should have basically called Lombre unable to battle, since it broke the rules and would be disqualified. Jimmy admitted that he now knew he did wrong, and was very mad at himself for messing up, and promised not to mess up again. Serena realized that she was probably being too harsh on Jimmy, not wanting him to get upset, as she simply said Jimmy made his judgment too early, and he just needed to have more self-confidence to know not to call the match too early, and stated that even if he did make the wrong decision, he had to remain confident in it, so that he could earn the respect of trainers as a judge, and admitted that it was perfectly okay and normal for him to make mistakes while he was still training and learning. The important thing was that he didn't make those mistakes when he actually became a referee. It soon got very dark out, so Ash and the gang were permitted to stay at a little hotel room, or a dorm rather, in the school building. And while Ash and the gang were in this dorm room, they talked about their match from earlier in the day. Well, Ash and Brock did anyways, with Ash admitting that he saw how tough being a judge really was, and Brock stated that he knew well that a judge must know the Pokemon as well as their attacks before making the judgment, since a Pokemon's health and the attacks they gave off and their strength could definitely determine if a Pokemon was actually knocked out or not. And admitted that getting used to all the Pokemon battle rules wasn't an easy task, admitting that it took him a long time to be able to be an honorary ref. He couldn't imagine being an official ref as well. It'd be hard. Max then remembered how hard it was for his father to learn the rules of a battle, as well as Kenny for that matter, since he had to learn them in even more detail since he was an actual ref, and stated that it would definitely be an honor for anyone to be a Pokemon League judge, since it required a lot of effort and hard work to do, no matter what gym or what battle you were reffing. Brock pointed out that only a handful of people become judges because of how hard it was to get into the position, which was why people like Jimmy were training so hard to become one. He couldn't just magically become a judge one day. And Brock also stated that even though he knew being a battle referee or judge was hard, Max mentioning his father made Brock remember that it was really hard for him to be both a gym leader and a battle referee at the same time, and realized that gym leaders had to have the knowledge of both a battle judge and a gym leader. They had to be able to battle by the rules and know the rules extremely well. May nodded in agreement, admitting that she definitely saw how her father's job as a gym leader, or any gym leader for that matter, was basically just a judge's job, but harder. Although she didn't dismiss how hard being a judge was in general. Suddenly, Pikachu noticed something out by the window that Ash and Pikachu had been sitting on, and Ash was able to identify what Pikachu saw as Jimmy sitting with the 3 second stage starter Pokemon outside by a little pool. Jimmy, unbeknownst to Ash and the gang, was talking with his Pokemon about how bad he felt over his judging mistakes earlier in the day. Just then, Ash and the gang approached Jimmy, wanting to see what was bothering him as they asked him, and Jimmy just claimed that he was thinking about something. This led May to ask if he was alright and if he was thinking about anything serious, and Jimmy just said that he was totally fine. Although this was an obvious lie, as he put his head down in shame, still thinking of all the mistakes he made earlier in the day. Ash believed that part of why Jimmy was upset was because he yelled at him earlier, so he apologized for this, but Jimmy told him not to apologize since it was Jimmy's fault that he messed up with his battle judgment, so Ash had a reason to yell. Jimmy's 3 starter Pokemon, well, the ones in the middle stage, you know what I mean, Ivysaur, Wartortle, and Charmeleon, seemed confused as to why Jimmy was upset and all that, so he explained to them his blunders that he had made earlier in the day. And he then revealed to Ash and the gang that before he decided to become a Pokemon referee, he was actually an aspiring trainer, and he added that Ash reminded him of his old self. Ash and the gang was somewhat shocked by this, but Jimmy just went on, explaining that he loved catching and raising Pokemon aside from his 3 starters. Meanwhile, a large mech came roaring extremely loud out of the ocean and onto the beach. It had tank treads and a circular body with prongs sticking out. It was just fucking weird. For a Team Rocket mech, it sure was bizarre. Yeah, that's right, it was owned by Team Rocket, who had come out of their Magikarp sub, and they were planning to steal Jimmy's Pokemon. Ash and the gang, Ivysaur, Wartortle, and Charmeleon listened intently as Jimmy then began to explain his whole story, with Ash and the gang especially curious. Jimmy started with how he had met his starter Pokemon and first became a Pokemon trainer, admitting that the first starter Pokemon that he actually got was a Squirtle, which eventually evolved into his Wartortle, as we then see a flashback, which involved Jimmy explaining how he had managed to acquire his other 2 starter Pokemon if they weren't actually his starters. Essentially, one day, while Jimmy and his Wartortle were looking for new Pokemon to capture, they eventually got lost in the woods and got very tired as they had no food left eventually, and were forced to just sit there and rot. And they only had 1 rice ball left to eat, and they both tried to force each other to eat it, wanting the other one to be happy as opposed to themselves, but they were both too generous to eat the rice ball. Jimmy tried his absolute best to make sure his Wartortle got the rice ball before him, but Wartortle insisted that Jimmy get it instead, so they ended up having a game of shove, trying to shove the rice ball into each other's hands, and as they pushed back and forth, Wartortle accidentally knocked it away and sent it rolling down a nearby hill, and it happened to roll right into an Ivysaur's mouth as it was yawning, and the Ivysaur gulped it down in one bite. Ivysaur soon realized that it had stolen the last rice ball from Wartortle and Jimmy, though unintentionally, but it still felt bad, and decided to follow Jimmy and Wartortle around and help them search for food in the forest, and eventually Ivysaur became attached to Jimmy and Wartortle and decided to join Jimmy as his next Pokemon. And apparently, Ivysaur wasn't able to find any more food, but it was able to find the exit to the forest, so they were free from the forest. Yay! The flashback then ends, as May and Max interrupted the flashback, stating how impressed they were with Ivysaur's helpfulness. Ash demanded that Jimmy get back to his story, asking how Jimmy got his Charmeleon, and Brock wanted to know this as well. So the flashback resumed as Jimmy explained that one day he happened to fall into a lake while passing by it with Ivysaur and Wartortle. Though thankfully, since Ivysaur and Wartortle didn't fall in the water, Ivysaur was able to use its vines and Wartortle was able to use its hands to pull Jimmy out of the water, although he had passed out. When he came to, he realized he now had something under his shirt, likely from the water. So he went to go pull it out, and he did manage to, and he found out that it was a golden Magikarp. This dude just randomly found a fucking shiny Magikarp, of course. A random-ass fisherman then passed by and claimed that he was super in love with the golden color that this Magikarp had, obviously because it was a fucking shiny, and offered to trade Jimmy his Charmeleon for it. And Jimmy accepted, clearly not knowing how fucking rare this Magikarp was. He not just thought it was a regular one, but anyways, that was how Jimmy got his Charmeleon. He traded a rare, shiny Magikarp. The flashback then ended, and Ash and the gang were amazed by everything they had just heard, and the fact that Jimmy was able to get 3 starter Pokemon. And they noted how Jimmy was lucky to get Charmeleon. I guess they didn't know about how rare Gold Magikarp was either. Anyways, Max then questioned Jimmy on how far he got as a trainer with the help of his starter Pokemon, and this led Jimmy to admit that he only got 1 badge as he pulls out the Cascade badge to show it to Ash and the gang. Ash and the gang were very impressed by this, particularly Brock and Ash, who assumed that Jimmy must have beat their friend Misty, since she was now the gym leader of Cerulean Gym, and Ash admitted that Jimmy had to have been a pretty good trainer if he was able to beat Misty, and questioned how he did it. Jimmy then goes into another flashback, though, as we see him meeting one of Misty's sisters, Daisy, and Jimmy explains that he just happened to stumble upon the gym and meet Daisy, who was looking for someone to help her clean the gym's pool area. So he accepted, and he was given the Cascade badge as a reward, adding that his starter Pokemon helped him clean as well. He figured it would be good training. Max thought that Jimmy should have had to battle a gym leader to get the badge no matter what, and May admitted that Jimmy was severely lucky to not have had to battle. Jimmy did admit that he honestly asked for a battle, but apparently the gym leader at the time, Misty, was out that day. Maybe that was when she went to go meet up with Ash during the 2 Togepi episodes. Who knows? Once that little flashback had ended, Ash and the gang questioned Jimmy on how he had came to Bamba Island in the first place, leading Jimmy to go into another flashback as he explains the fact that he never actually won a battle and was just drifting in a boat one day looking for a new place to try and find a person to battle after setting off from the Lily Cove port. But to add on to his bad luck streak of not getting any wins, he somehow had fallen asleep one day on his boat and didn't pay attention to where it was going, so he somehow drifted away to Bamba Island and decided to stay afterwards. Jimmy then admitted that his Pokemon were asleep as well, so they couldn't have stopped the boat from drifting. And he also later found out the cause of the drifting, which was when the boat's support string, which it had since it was only a small fishing boat, came undone. And Jimmy then laughed at how unfortunate all of his situations had been. May admitted that she was extremely interested in Jimmy's story, and asked how he became a judge in the first place, or how he decided that he wanted to not be a trainer and be a referee instead, leading Jimmy to explain that he loved his Pokemon, and even though battling was fun, he felt like just being their friends and only watching battles would be better. Basically, he didn't want to injure his Pokemon if he didn't have to. Also, he likely just got frustrated after having too many losses, and he probably viewed it as some sort of destiny that he ended up on a referee island as opposed to an island with trainers. Jimmy's Pokemon were touched by his concern for them, and May then stated her belief that Jimmy was very lucky to have made it onto Bamba Island so that he could find his true calling as a referee, but Jimmy stated that he wasn't sure if being a referee really was his calling, as he wasn't skilled enough to be a referee or a trainer either, so he didn't know what his goddamn calling would be. Just then, Serena interrupted the conversation. Of course, Brock instantly went hard-eyed and was about to go try and flirt with Serena again, but before he could, Serena talked to Jimmy, admitting that she now knew the perfect job for him, and it had to involve with using his heart. Jimmy was kind of confused by this, leading Serena to explain that even if he might not be a great judge or a great trainer, he was still kind at the end of the day, and if anything, he showed that he had devotion to his 3 starter Pokemon, taking their feelings into consideration, and that really impressed Serena. Before Jimmy could say anything else, the conversation was then interrupted again as 3 large mechanical hands came and grabbed Jimmy's 3 starters away and placed them inside Pokeball casings on the mech. Ash and the gang looked up, wondering who the fuck this could be, even though they knew the answer when they went from being shocked to not shocked at all. Seeing Team Rocket pop out of the mech and do their motto, stating how determined they were to get away with Ivysaur, Charmeleon, and Wartortle. Also going on and on about how the structure of the mech was a little different, since it was a circular body, and it was essentially a large Pokeball with 3 other Pokeball cases extending out from it. After Team Rocket had finished the motto, with Chimecho joining in, Ash and the gang could only watch in horror as Jimmy's 3 starters stayed in the mech, encased in the mini Pokeballs, which also acted as the mech's prongs that could be seen. As James continued to brag about how awesome and different their new mech was, Jesse pressed a button connected to the mech that latched a super strong lock on all the Pokeball prong casings so that the starters could not escape. Although at least Jimmy's starters could be seen, since the Pokeball prong cases were made out of glass. Team Rocket then retreated into their mech, and then the mech took off, creating a huge dust cloud as it speedily drove away. Although, even though Ash and the gang were coughing and distracted by the dust, Jimmy desperately rushed through the dust and chased after the mech, eventually managing to grab on to the mech and climb up on it, exclaiming that he would not lose his Pokemon no matter what. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang in Serena, the dust then cleared, and May was the first one to realize that Jimmy was gone, and Brock suggests that he must have went after Team Rocket's mech, and maybe he actually got on top of it, despite it speeding away. Meanwhile, inside the mech, Team Rocket was gloating some more about how awesome and indestructible and different their mech was, as Wobbuffet forcibly popped out its Pokeball to agree, when suddenly Team Rocket became alerted by a loud banging noise, and the Team Rocket soon noticed on a monitor screen in the mech that Jimmy was on top of the mech, banging a rock he had grabbed against Wartortle's Pokeball cage, trying to free it. Jesse got mad at this, obviously, and commanded Meowth to get rid of Jimmy, leading Meowth to stop the mech in its tracks and make it shake by pressing a lever, which causes Jimmy and his three Pokemon to cry out in fear as Jimmy almost falls off the mech. Ash and the gang and Serena then caught up to the mech and panicked when they saw how Jimmy was very close to being thrown off the mech, and Meowth got annoyed that Jimmy was even still on at all, and sends the mecha into a spin drive, and but after pressing a lever to activate this, Jimmy's Pokemon watched in horror as Jimmy was thrown from the mech and landed on the ground by Ash and the gang, who helped him up. But even though he was helped up, Jimmy obviously seemed depressed that he failed to save his Pokemon. And Jimmy started to lose hope that he could ever do anything right, although Serena then butt in, saying that Jimmy couldn't give in no matter what, and stated that Jimmy just had to reach into his heart and use that strength to save his starter Pokemon, stating that he had to have confidence and trust his heart, knowing that his heart was what caused him and his Pokemon to be together in the first place. And Jimmy's Pokemon felt the same way about him and had the same heart and the same kindness for him, and added that they were his friends through and through. Ash and Nate also added that Wartortle, Ivysaur, and Charmeleon all chose to be with Jimmy, so they must have saw some potential in him, so he should act on that potential and have confidence from it and save the Pokemon. Jimmy retorted that he really wanted to save his Pokemon, but he just didn't have the skills to, even if he realized a long time ago, really, that him and his Pokemon both cared for each other. Serena then adds, though, that if Jimmy wanted to be good at anything to do with Pokemon, he had to learn that Pokemon would battle for their trainers if their trainers battled for them, and if Jimmy's Pokemon were willing to battle for him, then Jimmy should put all of his previous doubts about not doing anything good aside and battle for them, and stated that he basically had to forge his own destiny. Who cares if he had bad luck? He had to try and push through it. Jimmy realized that Serena was right, and he could push through bad luck, and came to the conclusion that maybe all of his bad luck wasn't really bad luck. It was just a way for him to have a pathway to get to the spot that he was at right now, so he could finally have the realization he needed to, and he was ready to try and save his Pokemon. However, Rockman noticed something and pointed for everyone to look up near the top of the mech, and it was then that everyone else saw what Brock saw, which was that Jimmy's three Pokemon were trying hard to break free from the Pokeball cages. Jimmy encouraged them, but Team Rocket just laughed, stating that all the cages were indestructible, no matter what. Hearing this, Jimmy immediately rushed over to the mech, trying to get on top of it again to help out his Pokemon and prove that the cages weren't indestructible, but before he could get up onto the mech again, one of the mech's arms punched him away, knocking him down to the ground. Seeing Jimmy hurt, his three starter Pokemon cried out in anger, and Wartortle started to channel this anger, beginning to glow. Everyone was shocked by this, and Team Rocket freaked out, knowing what was going to happen. This glow obviously meant that Wartortle was evolving, and sure enough, with Wartortle's increased size into a Blastoise now, it was able to break free, destroying its Pokeball cage, just as it had wanted. It was basically so angry, both from Jimmy getting hit and being captured, that it was able to evolve because it was so angry. Jimmy was obviously very shocked to see that his Wartortle evolved into Blastoise, because it had been so long since it evolved into a Wartortle, but Jimmy was even more shocked when he actually saw Blastoise in front of him, when it jumped down from the mech in front of him. Serena then stated her assumption that it must have evolved because of Jimmy's devotion and its respect for Jimmy. Jimmy realized this was probably true, but added that Blastoise also probably channeled its anger as well. And without further ado, Jimmy ordered his Blastoise to use a Hydro Pump to easily break Ivysaur and Charmeleon's cages, setting them free as they jumped down to where Blastoise was, making Team Rocket terrified as fuck, to the point where they couldn't even move, fearing what the three starters were going to do. But they didn't have much more time to think, as Ivysaur then used Razor Leaf, Charmander used Charmeleon used a Flamethrower, and Blastoise used a Hydro Pump, and all these attacks combined exploded the mech and sent Team Rocket blasting off, with Wobbuffet and Chimecho being blasted off last. With Team Rocket gone, Ash and the gang and Serena cheered, proud of Jimmy and his Pokemon's strength, as Jimmy thanked his Pokemon. Serena then told Jimmy that she had never seen such a powerful Hydro Pump, Flamethrower, and Ivysaur, and stated that the Pokemon must have been extra powerful because of Jimmy's bond with them. Jimmy doubted this, but Ash and the gang convinced Jimmy that a bond could definitely make your Pokemon stronger, referencing Ash and his Pikachu. Max took interest in Blastoise Hydro Pump, especially commenting how awesome it was, and May scanned Blastoise with her Pokédex to learn more about it. Serena then admitted that Jimmy had shown some awesome battle skills, so therefore he could focus more on becoming a better trainer, and would likely do better starting off as a trainer and then progressing to a judge later if he still wanted, and added that although she would always keep a spot open for him if he did want to return to the judge school when he was ready to become a referee, and she officially expelled him for now so that he could become a Pokemon trainer first, adding that if Jimmy focused on battling with his Pokemon, then ref skills would come naturally. Jimmy was glad to hear that someone had faith in him becoming a trainer and promised to do so and forge his own destiny and go by whatever path was right for him. Maybe he'd become a referee later, maybe not. Ash was excited to see that Jimmy was ready to follow his own destiny and congratulated Jimmy, just as the rest of the gang did, with Ash saying he was excited to battle Jimmy one day and excited to have a new rival once he resumed being a Pokemon trainer, while Serena stated that she would be the referee of Ash and Jimmy's battle. The next day, Jimmy had decided to go back to Lily Cove City to find another way, to find other trainers to battle and continue his journey. So they all went back to the port so Jimmy could set off. But before Jimmy set off, May wished him good luck, followed by the others, and Ash admitted that Serena's class was fun and he enjoyed having a double battle. Serena thanked Ash and Brock for teaching some of the students some shit, and Brock proceeded to take the opportunity to flirt with Serena once again, stating that he would help out Serena anytime, leading Max to pull Brock away, not by the ear, but by the arm this time. The episode then ends with Jimmy departing on his boat to Lily Cove City, and Ash and the gang departing on a small boat after Serena called one for themselves, so that they could go to the next destination, which was Maz Deep City, on an island. But as Ash and the gang departed on the small boat, they saw Jimmy departing on his, and they yelled goodbye to Jimmy, and they also yelled goodbye to Serena, who was still standing on the port, and Jimmy and Serena both wished Ash luck in his Maz Deep gym battle.